I'm Suzanne Denitz from Georgia State University, and we're doing a Religious Lives interview. May I get your full name, please?
Nurjahan Daya, but I prefer to be called Nuri.
Nuri.
Yes.
Okay, great. And we are in Tucker, Georgia at Nuri's home. And today is February 16th, 2011. Okay. Okay, we're going to start with your childhood here.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your earliest memories regarding your faith? And if you can recall a specific moment, that would be great, or a specific event.
I'm not sure about the faith part right now as a little girl.
Or your religion.
But as far as religion is concerned, I remember going to the Jamaat Khana, which is our house of worship. But in terms of faith and spirituality, I remember being in grade 3. I think I was probably 7 years old, and a teacher asking the class, what would you do if you had 1,000 shillings? That was the currency in Dar es Salaam. And, everybody was thinking of different things they would do. And I remember saying that I would give it out to those who were less fortunate. And she was very pleased, and it kind of lit me up that my teacher was pleased. Mm-hmm. It lit me up because I was looking for some kind of acknowledgement from somebody, because I myself come from a very dysfunctional family. So really there were a lot of people who influenced my thinking and made me into what I am today.
Okay. Can you tell me, just for the background, a little bit about when this was, where you lived, where your family came from?
Yes. So this was in Dar es Salaam. I was born in Dar es Salaam, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. My grandparents came from India in the late 1800s or early 1900s. Both my parents were born in Dar es Salaam, and so was I and my children, even my husband. So we are talking about, as far as this incident is concerned, this probably was probably around 1951, when I was around 7. And this teacher had a lot of influence on me. She was the first person in my life to show me any affection, female affection. And that really carried me through for a few years.
Wow.
Yeah. And subsequently, I was very fortunate because, God opened a lot of windows for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, tell me about your family and their religion and how religion was handled in your home.
My family is an Ismaili family, a Shia Imami Ismaili faith. It's the Ismaili faith is part of Islam, Shia Islam to be exact, and both my parents were practicing Ismailis, and so was I and my siblings. So that's Ismaili faith. I remember going to Jamaat Khana every evening. Yes, and also religious education was part of our curriculum. I went to a parochial school which was run by the Aga Khan and his institution. The Aga Khan is our spiritual leader, and we had boys' school and girls' school, and religious education was part of the curriculum. Not a greater part, but there was at least 45 minutes of religious education perhaps every other day.
And did you at home, were prayers?
Yes, prayers were part of our family every evening, in the morning as well. And because of the, I think that is true, because of the dysfunctionality of our family and the kind of situation that my mother was in, she would always encourage us to pray. The dysfunctionality was not really a big thing on its own, but in terms of being a child and experiencing this was hard. It's only, in my grown-up years, I understand this was part of a, postpartum blues kind of thing, and misunderstanding between the parents, and that kind of continued for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in some ways it strengthened me in my faith, but in other ways, because of the lack of affection, it kind of opened up a broader vista, and it kind of, I let more people into my life, or maybe I was blessed by all the teachers who came into my life, and my friends and their parents, who influenced my thinking, who gave me my values, actually, which is strange to say it at this time, but this is what happened.
Did you, when you were young, were there any people other than, so you say your teachers were the biggest influences in your life?
My teachers, the literature and the poetry that we read, and
what kind of literature? Do you remember any specific authors?
yeah, we had A Tale of Two Cities. Do you remember Tale of Two Cities?
Barely.
It's kind of vague now, but Tale of Cities, where one of the villain is a kind man. Mm-hmm. Like a Robin Hood, but not quite. I wish I could remember more. Maybe I should pick up the book and read it, yes. But, just the kindness that people showed, the talent that they saw in me, and the fact that they wanted me to become a journalist because they felt that I had good writing skills. But really, there was no guidance in my life other than my teachers. Mm-hmm. No influence to push me. Mm-hmm. So that kind of affected, where I, what I became later on in life.
Did you, when you were a child, did you think about the religion? Did you think about God or your place in the universe? Or was religion just more of something that you did because it was expected of you and because everyone else was doing it? Do you remember?
I think at that time, you're right, Susan. I think at that time, as I was growing up and into my early teens, that was just part of what I did because everybody was doing it and I was expected to do it. Mm-hmm. It was only later on, and I think I was probably about 13 or so, when Aga Khan III passed away, and the current Aga Khan became the Imam of the community. And I remember him coming to Dar es Salaam, and there was a huge ceremony, and there were thousands of people. And, there was a ceremony where, we lined up and received blessings from him. And that had a huge impact on me. Mm-hmm. It just, I remember feeling very, very happy and elated. And my own personal circumstances were still very trying, but there was nothing to compare that happiness that I had in his presence. And I don't know what it was, whether it was inspiration or I can't put a word to it, but I just was so elated. And later on in life, I kind of remembered that, and I thought, this blessing that I received, it fueled and gave me energy. It, you know, it gave me that energy to get on with life. And I'd like to jump now to after I graduated from high school. A friend of mine wanted me to go to a college with her because it was far away and she had to ride a bus.
And
she
you were
was
still in Dharmasala?
Dar es Salaam. Dar es Salaam. And so this is how I got into teaching. Just accompanied her to the college, didn't even have my papers on me. And, Mr. Knight, who was the principal of the college, and he is a Quaker, and he was interviewing everybody. People had lined up. It was a small college with about probably less than 200 people. And so he was interviewing everybody, and I was just standing in line, and he interviewed me, and he accepted me. He accepted my, it was almost like an interview to qualify for an entrance into that college.
Had you planned on doing that?
No, nothing was planned.
Before you go, I want to hear about this, but before you go, was there anything in your, anything different happened to you in high school as far as your thinking, like as you went through adolescence, as you went through puberty? Can you remember, was there anything,
Suzette,
any changes?
there was nothing.
Nothing. Okay.
No, just, keep it right there, because I want to tell you that I have downplayed the sadness that was in my life, because I know I'll break down.
Okay. All right, let's talk about college. Now, this man was a Quaker, and was he the first person that you had ever known of a different faith?
No. All my teachers that I knew in my school and high school, most of them were from India. Yes, they were, all of them were from India. There were hardly any who were local. The African teachers were not yet ready to take on education, except for one teacher who was teaching us the local language, which was Swahili.
Okay.
Yeah.
But were they all
They were
Islamic?
They were not Muslims. They were not Muslims. They were Goans, Christians, Protestants and Catholics, both.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So you had, and did knowing someone of a different faith during the school years, did that have any influence on you?
No, it didn't have much influence at all. In Dar es Salaam, it was different. There were Christians, there were Muslims, there were Buddhists, there were Hindus. The first teacher that I talked about was a Hindu. And, everybody lived amicably. If it was Christmas, everybody celebrated Christmas. If it was a Muslim holiday, everybody celebrated Eid.
Oh.
If it was Diwali, which is the Hindu holiday, everybody was out, playing and, lighting those firecrackers. So it was a very different kind of atmosphere from what we see these days. Yeah. If it was the fasting month, people would lay their mats outside, and even passers-by would be invited to come and share in the meal that was prepared for breaking the fast.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was nice.
So, there was not that curiosity about the other faith. There was acceptance. And, there was a lot of love and a lot of togetherness in the community. So that, it was a very nice community.
Good. Okay,
Yes.
now let's go back to your college interview. I want to hear about this.
So now about the college. So I joined the college, and I got to know not only Mr. Knight, but Mrs. Knight as well. She used to come and teach us music. Now, Mr. Knight was a Quaker, but not Mrs. Knight. But she kind of went along, you know. And I got to know the Knight family, all the children. I got to know Hilda Fowler, who was, we used to call her Miss Fowler, who was also from England. Mr. and Mrs. Knight were also from England, but they had traveled all over the world. They had been to Egypt, to Saudi Arabia, to India, to Lebanon, and they had taught in many countries. Miss Fowler had gone to India and she had traveled a little as well. I had some American professors as well, Dr. Beidler, Dr. Shaw, Dr. Palmieri, and once again it was a good group of people, but the person who had the most influence on me was Mr. Knight. Mrs. Knight as well, and they would invite me to their home during vacation, and I would go stay with them for a couple of weeks sometimes. They would come and pick me up and take me to extracurricular activities. There was a lot of generosity in Dar es Salaam, you know, because not everybody had cars, and so either Mr. Knight or Mrs. Knight would come pick us up, and, you know, he would tell me, make sure there are enough people who can fit into the car, and I would get a lot of people, and we would cram into the car, and he would take us to the college for stargazing in the evening, or maybe bird watching on weekends, swimming, that kind of thing. But what I got from Mr. and Mrs. Knight was this spirit of sharing, of caring for other people, of contributing to society, the learning, the curiosity. I got a lot out of Mr. and Mrs. Knight, and I continued my relationship with them even after they left Dar es Salaam, even after I had graduated, even after I got married, and to this day. Every few years I go and visit with them in England. Miss Fowler also, she is a Protestant. She's now in her 90s, and she visited me a couple of times here, twice here in Atlanta, once in Zambia. We had moved to Zambia after Tanzania. And the generosity, their giving nature, that really affected me. And later as I began to learn more about my faith, it resonated with the values that my faith taught me. And that was the most beautiful part, you know, that it kind of came together for me. And it blossomed inside me into and grew into what I am now.
So tell me a little bit more about college. What did you study?
In college, I studied more pedagogy and teaching methods, and how to relate to students, and how to make whatever I was teaching relevant to the students. So I really learned to share affection with the students during teaching practice. And at that time, I did not realize that that was my calling. It was only later on in life, after I had tried other things, after coming to Atlanta, that I realized, when I was talking to my husband after I had retired and saying, wonder what I should get, I wonder what my calling is. And he didn't answer the first time. And later on, when I came back from my religious education center where I have been teaching religion, see, religion comes back now, religion to my students, And I came back with a real high, not induced by any drugs or anything. That he said to me, and what about that thing you were talking about? And I said, what? He said, you were saying, now I wonder what my calling is. Mm-hmm. It's then that I realized really that what has carried me through in these last 26 years in Atlanta is the teaching that I have been involved in every weekend. Right. I have held many positions in my community which have, and these are all voluntary, which have taken up a lot of my time and my energy, but none has been as rewarding as teaching, because you give of yourself to your students. And I think, Suzanne, this is part of my payback to society for giving me what I needed in my childhood.
Wow. Well, tell me about, just your journey a little bit after college, when you got married, how religion played a part, and just, where you lived and where you traveled and everything.
Excuse me. Yeah. So from Dar es Salaam, we went to Zambia in 1972. At that time, my children were 4 and 2 years old. And we lived in a small town in Zambia, and we did not have a Jamaat Khana there, place of worship. But what was interesting was that I taught at a mixed, that's not the right way to put it. This is the initial part. I taught at Kafue Primary School, and I made Catholic and Protestant friends. Zambia was primarily a Christian, or is primarily a Christian country as opposed to Tanzania. And I made many friends there, and I learned about their faith and their devotion to faith, and I really felt the absence of the Jamaat Khana, house of worship there. And this went on for about a year and a half, and then suddenly we discovered that there was a Jamaat Khana, place of worship, in Lusaka, which was like 50 miles away. And there wasn't a regular Jamaat Khana. People would gather at different homes and get together for prayers and, kind of rotate.
Yeah.
And so I think this is where the practice of my faith really started. It had started back in Dar es Salaam, after I got married. But, with children being young and the uncertainty, the political uncertainty, and all that, it kind of, it was an anxious time. And so I didn't get to practice a lot of it. But once we were in Zambia, and we started going to Jamaat Khana, although it was not, like I said, it was not an established Jamaat Khana. We were rotating from home to home. I started thinking about how wonderful it would be to have a Jamaat Khana. And at that point, I started remembering the kind of things that occurred, that I saw happening in Jamaat Khana, where people would be helping one another out. There was a home for widows and widowers close to the Dar es Salaam Jamaat Khana. In fact, in the same building, but, it was like a part of the same building, and yet the building was a little bit, separated. Mm-hmm. Yes, separated. And I remember volunteers working all day, all night, preparing for celebrations. I remembered huge pots of food being prepared by volunteers, and kind of all came back. And that is the time I started longing for a Jamaat Khana where I was. But it wasn't to be at that time, because, people were expatriates, and, the maximum number of people that I counted on a peak attendance day during a holiday was less than 100. And these people came from neighboring countries like Zaire and other neighboring places and cities and towns. And I would talk to my children about how wonderful it was to be a part of our community, which was sort of lacking in Zambia. I say lacking, but really there were good things happening. I remember my husband getting a call from a fellow Ismaili saying he needed help, and the help he needed was to go and bathe an old man who had become bedridden. So, there were good things happening, but not on a big scale. And for 8 years, and I have no reason how and why, I had this huge, deep yearning to be in a place where I could serve my community. At that time in Zambia, after Kafue, which was the little town, we moved to Lusaka. And when we moved to Lusaka, I applied and got a place to teach at St. Mary's Girls' School. And this was a high point in my life. Out of all my teaching years as a secular school teacher, I think St. Mary's was one of the best periods in my life. I really enjoyed working with Sister Paul, who was an Irish sister, and Sister De Angelis, who was a Dutch South African nun. The teachers there were some of Indian origin, some of some Africans, and Beryl was British. Mrs. Porritt and Mrs. Wickstead were British as well. So it was a mixed group of teachers, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed going to the chapel. I used to enjoy going to the chapel and praying. And at that point I thought, wow, you don't need a Jamaat Khana per se, or you don't need a temple or a church. You can go into any place and pray. So that, again, that helped me to grow into what I am today. This being with people of other faiths, and realizing that spark that is bestowed on an individual, that is also the spark that unites humanity. And often when there was a difficult parent to confront, Sister Paul would come and tell me, Mrs. Daya, please pray for me. And when she would see me with a long face because of, certain difficulties or whatever, she would say, don't be afraid to be happy. And, it just, it brought to me the notion that there is goodness in people of all faiths, color, different religions have no part to play in life. I think that we make them. We make them important. Certain people like to find differences, but really we are all a part of the same humanity. It's how we look at things. We make life either easy or difficult for ourselves. I need a break. I think I'm rambling. So, Suzanne, I'd like to go back to that desire that I had to serve for community, to serve in my own community. I was already serving in Zambia. I forgot to tell you that. I had my friend Pat, who was Catholic, Maggie, who was of no particular faith. Maggie actually was born into a Muslim. Maggie, first of all, was an African, a mixed African, mixed blood, white and black, and she was from Malawi. She was her mother was Muslim, but in Malawi, if you wanted to go to school, you had to be baptized, you had to become Catholic in order to go and receive education. So, Maggie had to become Christian. So I'm not sure whether she practiced Christianity or if she practiced the Muslim faith. I have no idea. But it didn't matter. We were a group of friends, probably 10 to 12, 15 friends of different faiths. There were people from Thailand, African Americans from United States, white Americans, Greek neighbor from next door, a girl from Zanzibar. And so, we used to go and visit sick people in hospitals. So there was community service. But for 8 years, I longed and I prayed for an opening which would give me a chance to be in my own community and to serve. And this, I think, came from my childhood memories. So although I had not been...
By your own community, you mean your own religious community?
In my own religious community. Although I had not really had a chance as a young girl to participate in voluntary work in my own community until later on for a couple of years where I was a member for Women's Association. Apart from that, I had not had a chance. But I remember the kind of good things that happened in the community. And so for 8 years, I longed for that. And I would tell my children. In fact, I think I even, talked to the point of glorifying, because things kind of grow inside you, when you are thinking about them. Mm-hmm. But yeah. I did get a chance. So finally, when we came to Atlanta in 1984, and this just didn't happen with Atlanta, but first our point of entry was Washington, D.C., and my friend Pat came to pick us up from the airport. Pat is Catholic, and her husband is, I don't want to call Kevin an atheist, but really he doesn't believe in God, but he's there with Pat all the time. So we stayed with Pat for like 6 weeks, and over Labor Day weekend, we came to Atlanta to visit with some friends. And my children saw that there was not a very big community, only about 200 people or so, but there was a community, and they saw the school here, and they had not yet gone to school in the United States because it was vacation. They decided for us that we were going to stay in Atlanta, mm-hmm. And so my husband and I had to drive back to...
How old were the children then?
The children, Nishma was 16. Oh. She went straight to high school, to Dunwoody High. Mm-hmm. And Alim was 14, and he went to high school as well, to middle school, I think. And Rahim was probably around 10 or 11. So he went to primary school. And we got an apartment in Dunwoody. And so that year, 1984, in September, right after we came here, in spite of not having a good job or anything like that, I straight away decided that I was going to get involved with our community, and I started with the Religious Education Center. Can we pause for a second?
Sure.
So, Suzanne, to go back a little, we moved from Zambia to United States, and this move, the preparation of the move, took 3 years. In Zambia, we had got work permit, so really we were aliens there, and that was not a permanent place for us. And we could see that what had happened in Dar es Salaam in terms of the standard of education going down and a couple of generations of people going without education was going to eventually happen in Zambia. My brother-in-law had already moved to Los Angeles, United States, and he sponsored us to come to United States, and this was why we came to United States. And we went first to Washington, D.C. because Kevin, who was my friend Pat's husband, had visited with us, and he had invited us to his home, and both Pat and Kevin had told us that we could make their home a base for ourselves. They were kind of upset when we moved to Atlanta, but I think they understood. So now to go back to this teaching thing. So 1984 is when I started teaching, and I have not given up teaching yet. Whether I'm sick or whether I am not in a good mood, whether I have other things to do, when I get into the classroom, I forget. I forget everything except my students, and teaching has given me a lot of energy. It has given me a purpose in life. It has energized me. I get to give back to society what society gave me. There are children who come from affluent families who are needy in terms of attention. There are things you can give to children that they don't get from their parents. And in getting involved in this work, I got into many leadership positions. I also felt the need to get more education in terms of not just going to college, but going to places like Landmark to improve myself.
What is Landmark?
Landmark is an institution that is there worldwide. I know there is Landmark in Japan, in Israel, in India, in a lot of countries in South America, here in Atlanta, in other cities in United States, in Canada. And, it's just a weekend course, but it comes in stages, not just one weekend, because the weekend course then has, probably 10, 12, 15 weeks of getting together to practice, the learnings that and the practice of certain certain skills. It's really for self-development, to look at yourself a little differently, to see how you are being, and to strengthen you. So, I took several courses of Landmark to grow myself. I kind of felt at that time that there was, because of my childhood, there were certain areas that needed to be developed. There were certain voids in my life, certain vacuums in my life that I needed to kind of fill in to become a stronger person. And once again, as it happened in the college and in Zambia, in meeting people of different faiths, at Landmark, I met people from different faiths. I met people from different walks of life, people who had gone through different experiences in life, who were ready to open their hearts and open their mouths and share their experiences. And so that in listening to them, I began to realize that the problems that I had thought were in my own life, the problems that I thought were monumental, kind of dwindled in size. And it gave me a different outlook on life, gave me, it opened me up to looking at people in a more accepting way. I was always and always have been an accepting person, but in going to Landmark, it kind of, I think it humanized me to a greater degree. I don't think I can find any other way of saying it, but this is what happened to me at Landmark. I began to see how I could contribute in a bigger way to different people. And, as I started looking at people differently and in a more accepting way, I don't think this is coming out right, Suzanne.
Oh, it sounds good. It sounds good.
Okay. I think that the universe started to open up for me and give me more opportunities to interact with different peoples from different walks of life. And so,
did you see Landmark as part of your faith journey?
yes, I think I saw Landmark as a part of not only my faith journey, but also my personal journey into being what I am today.
And are those two things confabulated, or the faith journey and do you see your faith journey as something separate, or do you see it?
No, I think that it was part of a plan that is bigger than me to make me into what I am. This is how I feel. That I think where I had wanted that nurturing to occur, where that nurturing was not or had not happened in my life, in my early life, I think Landmark gave me that. Landmark gave me that, and together with working in the Jamaat Khana, nurturing these children and being in leadership positions where I was inspiring others to get into teaching. I think it all kind of came together for me, and I got an opportunity to travel with World Pilgrims. Have you heard of World Pilgrims?
No.
No. World Pilgrims is organized by FAMA, Faith Alliance of Metro Atlanta, where people of different faiths come together and work together to develop a better understanding. So FAMA had organized a pilgrimage to Turkey and the Greek Isles. So I traveled with a group of Christians of different denominations, with other Muslims, Jews, and we went to pray at synagogues, at mosques, at cathedrals and churches in Turkey and in the Greek Isles. And we got to know one another. We shared rooms with people of different faiths. We could not share a room with people of our own faith. And so in doing that, that really enriched our understanding of one another. Yeah.
Well, as an adult, how would you identify yourself religiously when you were a child, and then when you were a teenager? Would you have always identified yourself as the same?
Yeah, I have always identified myself as a Shia Imam Ismaili Muslim, and I still do, but there is a bigger part that exists within me. And many times, as much as I want to say I am an Ismaili, I am also part of humanity. You know, having come from Africa, of Indian origin, then coming here to America, I just don't feel like I have that identity that can say that, you know, I'm an African or I am an Indian or an American. It's all come together in this of humankind, you know?
Yeah.
So that's how I feel.
How do you practice your faith today?
I'm an Ismaili Muslim.
So do you practice all of the tenets as far as
right.
the prayers?
The going to Jamaat Khana, the serving people.
Ramadan?
Ramadan, I fast during Ramadan. And prayers 3 times a day. 3 times a day. Because, you know, in our prayers, we, of course, which is in Arabic, and they encompass many verses from the Quran. And so the 3 prayers, let's switch that off first. So there are, you know, 3 times prayers, which is obligatory. And then if you want the 5 times namaz, then it's upon you. Yeah. There is, you know, we also have a big part of our faith is personal search, and that is meditation. Yeah. So the Jamaat Khana is open every morning between 4 and 5.
In the morning? In
the morning.
Wow.
Yeah. You can do it at home on your own, or you can join the congregation. Yes. And
is that for prayer or for a meditation?
Meditation followed by the morning prayer.
Okay.
Yes. So that is one part. There is another part. There are, you know, service. Service to mankind. That is a big part of our faith. Then there is your personal responsibility to your family. That is another part. Seeking knowledge, that too is a big part of our faith. To seek knowledge, to go to school, to improve yourself. Looking after the environment, that's another big part too.
The physical environment.
The nature. Physical environment.
No, you certainly have done that. She has a beautiful, beautiful yard. Very, very well cared for.
Tolerance, acceptance of other faiths. The notion that there is only one God. We all pray to that one God. It doesn't matter, which path you take. Mm-hmm. All of us are praying to that same God. So that is a big part of my faith.
And is there a particular leader right now that you follow within?
Within, yeah. We have the Aga Khan, who is our spiritual leader. Yes. Yeah. And you must have seen his pictures elsewhere. Do you know much about him?
No, I do not. So if you want to tell me a little bit about
him. No, well, a little bit. He is the 49th in lineage from the time of the Prophet. The Shias believe that when the Prophet passed away, before the Prophet passed away, he declared Ali, his cousin and son-in-law, as his successor, and so he was going to leave behind the Quran and his son-in-law, his cousin and son-in-law as his successor. Mm-hmm. And so the Aga Khan, the current Aga Khan, is the 49th in that lineage. He's the direct descendant of the Prophet.
And what nationality is he? Like, do you know where he was born? Or?
He was born in Switzerland.
Mm-hmm. His parents were?
His parents, his mother was Italian, I believe, and his father was I'm trying to think. Give me a second.
Okay.
Yeah. See, the grandfather was of Persian origin, and then his father, I believe, had Persian and European blood.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm generalizing a little.
Okay. In regards to your children, have you raised them in the same faith?
Yes, I have. I raised them all in the same faith, but they decided to marry outside the community. So one of them is married to an Englishman who is, I believe, he's a Christian, and then my first daughter-in-law is a Christian as well. She's a Jehovah's Witness. Mm-hmm. And my youngest is married to Alyssa, who is an astrophysicist. And she calls herself agnostic.
Agnostic.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I see a lot of, all three of them have a lot of goodness in them. Mm-hmm. Alyssa, I know, believes a lot in meditation. She's a beautiful character, very wise and very learned. She's a good mother and a good wife. Then Shante is she's African American, and she is Jehovah's Witness. She is a master gardener, and I'm very proud of her. She also is a very loving, and very devoted to making this world a better place. Mm-hmm. She's a very strong character as well. And then I have David, my son-in-law, and he's a good husband. Mm-hmm. And a good father. And what more can you ask for?
Exactly. Have you had any particularly powerful spiritual experiences that we haven't already discussed?
You know, Susan, I told you I have held, you know, many positions in my community, mm-hmm. and I was a chairperson for Religious Education Board, and this is when our community was not very big. We had about, I don't know, maybe 700, 800 people, and one night, you know, I remember organizing a trying to think what it was. I think it was a training session for our teachers. I cannot remember exactly what it was, but it was some kind of a session that had really gone well. I don't know whether it was for the students. I really can't remember. Mm-hmm. But I remember going back, and I know we were living in an apartment at that time, and I was thinking, my cup runneth over today. And with that, I went to bed, and I was so elated. I don't know what, you know, I know people will call it a peak experience, but I remember going to bed and thinking to myself, you know, I am so happy right now that if this is the moment when God wants to take me away, I'm ready for it. Mm-hmm. I did not care whether my husband needed my support in paying that rent or that my children needed to be looked after. I didn't care. I was so ready. I felt so happy. Mm-hmm. And right at that moment, there was a huge, I am not exaggerating, there was such a huge burst of happiness right inside my chest. It almost, you know, felt, it was physical. I was not dreaming. I actually pinched myself, and I thought, wow, this has not happened after, you know.
When was this?
This was, it was 1997, before we moved to this house. Mm-hmm. We moved here in 1998, 99. So that must have been 1997. Mm-hmm. It wow. It was so powerful. And I wish this would happen again, but it doesn't happen. It hasn't happened again.
Stop it 1 second.
Like, it was so beautiful too.
Okay, hold on. Okay, there you go.
So when we came here, my children, especially the middle one, he said to me, Mommy, I wanted to go for Georgia certification, and I was looking at how to apply for it. And I was talking to my children, and Alim, my middle child, who I think is really wise, he said, Mommy, you don't want to get into that. And I said, why? And he said there were 2 reasons. One of them, he said, was because I get too close to my students. And he said that the authorities would put me in jail. I think my son knows me a lot. And so I asked him what the other reason was. And this is back in 1984. He said, Mommy, you will be so unhappy to see that there are so many children from single-parent homes. Mm. I know it must have affected him. And so he told me, he said, really? And, you know, knowing my son, I decided right then that I was not going to get into teaching in secular schools. So I kind of changed jobs a couple of times, and then I decided to get into insurance. I took a huge pay cut from where I was working. At that time I was working for a friend, and it was like choosing between friendship and job. And so I decided, no, this is the time to quit while it's still good. And so I joined, Maryland Insurance Company, which was later sold to Zurich, took a big pay cut, went to work for Zurich. I worked my way up from rating to underwriting to production underwriting and marketing. And I worked for Zurich for 23 years. Where were we? I forget. Why was I saying that?
Heart attack.
Yeah. And so I was, and while I was doing that, I was also teaching, like at our religious education education center, and doing other things as well. So that week in 2000, that was August, I flew to Jacksonville to our head office in Jacksonville, where I was supposed to mentor a group of young what were they? Underwriters.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they were young underwriters. And so I was there for a week. I remember flying back on Friday, and the weather was particularly bad. The flight was delayed a couple of times, and then on our way back there was a tornado, and the airplane had to skirt around it, and the flight, which was supposed to take only an hour from Jacksonville to Atlanta, took almost 2 hours. But, reached home safely. Saturday was very beautiful. I remember having breakfast on the porch, going to teach, and then Sunday my sister invited me to go with her to the Rialto, where her daughter was practicing for a play. So we went to the Rialto, and then we went shopping downtown, and I was thinking how tired I was. I had bought a pair of shoes for my husband, and they felt really heavy. After that, we went home, and my sister said to me, she said, "Why don't you call your husband? When dinner is ready, we can all have dinner and watch a movie." While we were watching the movie, I felt my chest was hurting at that time. And, at about 9 in the evening, I told my husband, I said, "I think we better go home. I'm not feeling that well. This pain in my chest is increasing." Before that, I had been going to the doctor, and she had done stress tests and done all kinds of things, which had not, she wasn't particularly worried. My blood pressure was a little high. But she managed it with pills. So after we came home, I took some antacids, nothing happened, and at about midnight, I told my husband, "I think we'd better go to the hospital. Maybe they'll find out this time what is wrong with me." Mm-hmm. So, and I thought this was a joke, but And we went to DeKalb Medical Center, and the nurses saw that I was laughing. I did not even think that it was anything significant, just a pain in the chest, but it was pretty bad. So finally at about 1:30, 2 o'clock, they started pumping heparin into me, and not on Monday, but on Tuesday, one of the doctors from the doctor's office where I used to go to came to see me, and he said, "Mrs. Daya, you had a minor heart attack, and we'll run some tests and release you." And I said, "No, I'm not going home until you tell me exactly what is wrong, and I would like you to do a test which will show you what is wrong with my heart." I didn't think it was right to release me that same day.
Right.
So then I tell you. So then he I think almost reluctantly told me he would contact Dr. Anderson. So Dr. Anderson was very kind. He kept his office open at 7:30 that evening. They took me for an angiogram, which revealed 2 arteries were blocked, And that evening, the doctor came to my room at DeKalb Medical Center, sat with my husband and me, and he told us that I would have to have a heart surgery. This was like nothing new to me. It didn't bother me. I thought, wow, this has to be done and I have to go through it. It didn't bother me one bit even. So it was not on Wednesday, but on Wednesday evening, while it was thundering, the weather was really bad, an ambulance rushed me to Piedmont Hospital. Thursday early morning, they prepped me. The evening before, it had stormed really badly. The two anesthesiologists who were there were cute young men. Cute. I think they may have been in their 20s. And they said, look out of the window and see how green and beautiful it is. And I'm looking out, and they were so kind, and they felt like two angels besides me. And they said, we are going to give you your anesthetic. And I just felt so at peace and so at ease. And so then I prayed at that time. And I prayed and I said to God, just as this heart surgery is going to clean the impurities from my physical body, please clean up my heart in another way, in the spiritual way, to take out all the muck and all the dirt that is inside of me. I prayed hard for that. And I tell you, Susan, my recovery was a breeze. The doctors who came to see me, my nurse, everybody was so exceedingly kind. The religious education center, the children, the teachers whom I had trained, the children who I taught, and my agents, my insurance agents, my co-workers, everybody sent me flowers and cards and messages of love. And my sister took me home after that to kind of to stay with her for a couple of weeks, although my husband was saying, no, I can look after her. She insisted, and so I went and I stayed with my sister, and that recovery was a breeze. It was almost like I needed that time to know how much I was loved and cared for.
Wow.
Yeah. And 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks after that, I read an article in a magazine that we don't subscribe to anymore. It's called Bottom Line. It's really a money magazine, but it had an article which said children and people who have gone through a difficult time in their childhood sometimes end up getting heart attacks. And I thought how true that was,
Wow.
Yeah, so this was like something that had to happen. And
Wow.
yeah.
Well, this has been really wonderful. We're going to start wrapping it up now, and I just want to ask you, how do you see yourself in comparison with other people that practice your religion? And do you see similarities or differences, or does this even occur to you?
In terms of people who practice the same faith?
Yeah, the same faith.
Our faith is so beautiful. Everybody interprets things the way they want to, and yet there is a commonality in the belief in one God, as there is a commonality with all other faiths. Everybody believes in that one same God that we pray to. We pray as a congregation, and then we have our time when we meditate, and that is a time of personal search and an understanding of our faith. So in terms of people who are who are of the same faith as I am, people come from different walks of life. There are people of different ethnicities, and they feel just like a family to me.
Yeah.
They feel like they are part of me. And the other thing, Susan, is that having taught in a Catholic school, having been, and I'm still a board member on FAMA, Faith Alliance of Metro Atlanta, having prayed with Christians and Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs as well. I had Sikh friends. I'm very much at ease with people. I'm very much at ease with people because I feel that we are just a part of humanity. And if I have had friends with whom I have had conversations about praying, and I was shocked to hear one friend of mine tell me, I'm going to pray to my God. And I'm thinking, poor Jean, you know, it comes from ignorance, I think. So I feel very fortunate that I have been blessed with this kind of a spirit that allows me to see the commonality in people of all faiths, of all colors, of all people from all walks of life.
Do you think that tolerance is something that most people acquire as they get older?
I think to a certain degree you are born with love for humanity. You know, tolerance to me, for me, tolerance is not enough, Suzanne.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough for me. Mm-hmm. You know, when you tolerate somebody, you are putting up with the differences.
Yeah.
So that's
right.
Yeah, and you know, I think it's a part of growing. It's a part of growing, and hopefully, that person who is tolerating the other will be able to see the other in the light of one. You know.
Right. Okay. In regards to the your faith and to your faith community, do you feel have you felt accepted by the Atlanta community as a whole?
Absolutely, yes. You know, some of us come from different ethnicities, and initially sometimes there is a tendency, I will not back away from there. There is a tendency in people to look at differences, but you know, when they see you make an effort, you yourself make an effort to get to know them better, when you accept the other, sometimes you don't leave them with a choice but to accept you. So in that way, you can influence the other. Where they were tolerating you, maybe,
right,
that they accept you as one of them, you know.
Wow. Have you ever had any experiences of people not tolerating your faith since you've come to Atlanta?
Within my own community, or
either
outside?
Or, yeah, in or out.
I have to think about that. Like I said, my friend Jean, poor thing.
She thought that her God was different.
Yeah, it was
than your
different.
God.
Yeah. But you know, I know that she's not a practicing Christian. I have had people come to the doorstep to try to convert me.
Yeah.
But I kind of laugh.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's funny. And you read and you hear, and people talk about people going to other people's doors and knocking or inviting them to churches, right. And I invite people to our functions as well, but not really for proselytizing. You just want people to know about you, for to create a better understanding, because it's ignorance that breeds all kinds of discords,
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. What would you want others most to understand about your faith and about yourself and your relation to your faith? If you could send a message out.
Our faith is very pluralistic. It's accepting. It's the cornerstone of our faith is service to others, leaving this place, leaving this world better than we found it, caring for the other, being our brother's keeper, our sister's keeper, educating people, bringing out the best. I think every human being has that spark, and we should see if we can enlighten that person, you know.
Yeah.
There's no need to convert anybody.
Right.
Everybody has got to be left alone, you know, to practice their faith. But I think we have to learn about other faiths so that we can better understand people
Right.
and where they are coming from. So, yeah.
Good. Well, I just need to get a little bit of demographic information. So, and some of these you may have already answered, but if you could just answer them again. What is your occupation?
I'm a retired teacher / underwriter and marketing, commercial lines, insurance.
Okay. When and where were you born?
Where and when? Dar es Salaam in 1944.
Okay, Dar es Salaam.
Dar es Salaam, Tanzania.
Tanzania,
Yes.
1944. What month?
September 11.
Ah.
And I had nothing to do with it.
You're a Virgo.
Virgo.
How do you describe your ethnicity?
That's tough. I told you. That is so tough, you know, because my parents were of Indian origin. No, my grandparents were of Indian origin. My parents were born in Tanzania. So, you know, as much as I would like to think of myself as African, I'm not the right color. I am now in America. I feel that I am part of America, but
What do you put on the census?
other.
Other. Okay.
There's nothing to describe me.
So you're an other. That's wonderful. What is your educational background?
I did college,
Mm-hmm.
4 years,
Okay.
and I've kept up, you know, audit
Right.
courses and stuff like that.
Okay. And your marital status?
Married with 3 children.
Okay. And what is your current religious affiliation?
Shia Imami Ismaili Muslim.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Susan, thank
this
you.
was really,
you will have to
really
come
great.
back because you didn't sample any of my cooking.